going to be discussing all things sponsored project related travel today. I'm Natalie Bayansky. I'm the Assistant Director for Post-Award here at SRS. And then we have Kathy Reek. She's currently the Senior Data Analyst for our office, but formerly she was an SRS Travel Auditor. So she'll bring a lot of experience to our presentation today. First, I just kind of want to go over what the Concur Report workflow looks like when you are allocating a project to a sponsored research account. So first, the traveler will enter the report or their delegate. So this could be somebody that's housed in the department or a program coordinator. If the traveler is not the PI, then it will route to the PI for approval. And then the next stop is with the SRS project administrator for review. And I will speak later about the specific items the project administrator is reviewing for. Next would be the SRS travel auditor review. This is not required for all reports, but we will talk about the specific areas where we will be allocating reports to the SRS travel auditor. And lastly, it goes to the system member for review. So let's now talk about the specific areas of the project administrator review. We get a lot of key elements from the Concur Report Header. So first, we're going to see who is the person traveling, making this trip, what are the dates of the trip, what is the benefit to the project, what is the travel classification, and what is the destination. So in the next slide, I have a screenshot of the report header and where we can find these specific data points in the report header. So like I mentioned, the employee name, so who's actually traveling. And so what we're looking for here is what is this person's role on the project? Are they paid on the project? If this is a non-TAMU employee, then we're looking for this famous external VID, which will show that this is going to another person outside of TAMU. And so if we see that, if it's a non-employee, then we're looking to see, okay, is this a consultant that we're paying, or is this a participant on the project? And are those people allowed to be paid or travel costs reimbursed on the award? Next, we're looking at the trip start dates and end dates to make sure that they're within the period of performance. Next, we're looking at the purpose and benefit. So here we want to see that there's a descript statement here about how this specific travel benefits the project and what's the relevance to the project. Next, we're looking at the travel classification, item D. And here we want to make sure that the appropriate travel classification is selected, because that will drive the object codes for all the expenses. And we want to ensure that that lines up with our approved budget. And then lastly, we're looking at the destination. So a couple of elements that we're pulling here are, is this a domestic trip? Is this a foreign trip? And that will make some routing determinations later on potentially. Also, we have some sponsors who just want to see in-state travel. So we want to make sure that if that's the case in this scenario, that only in-state travel is taken. Then after reviewing the report header, we move on to the expense detail. So first, we're going to look at the accounts that are allocated for these expenses. So we'll look at the account, and then we'll look at the overall amount to ensure that there are funding available to process this report. Next, we'll look at the object code classifications. And like I mentioned, this is all generated from that travel classification that's selected in the header. So we're looking at the generated object codes that are applicable to each expense listed and ensuring that those will map back appropriately to the sponsor approved budget. Then we start looking at the actual expenditures that are being claimed on the Concur report. So we'll look to see, things like hotel and meals and taxis or mileage reimbursement. Those are things that we're used to seeing on these types of reports. But should we see like business meals or incidentals, those are kind of that clues the project administrator into taking a closer look, pulling up that receipt, looking into that receipt in more detail to ensure that those items that were incurred are allowable on the project. We'll also be reviewing the respective amounts associated with these expenses as well. Here's a list of some generally unallowable expenses. We have entertainment expenses or social activities, parking or speeding tickets, alcoholic beverages, personal items due to lost or delayed baggage arrival, office supplies not related to the business, magazines, newspapers, books, hotel gym fees, hotel movie rentals, business meals, and specific to business meals, those are expenses. If they are incurred, we want to make sure that they're well justified. Also, we need a list of all the participants that attended the meal. And then lastly, costs for incurred for unreasonable failure to cancel transportation or lodging reservations. So after we've conducted our review, there are really two decision points at that point. Either we're going to approve the report, we feel like all of the expenses incurred are allowable and able to pay on the project. So if we are ready to approve, the project administrator will leave one of three comments. So you either leave a comment of federal funds, local funds, or state funds. And if in either of these scenarios, if the travel policy is not the system member's travel policy, we will leave an additional note to designate which specific travel policy we should follow. And then those are the reports that are routed to the SRS travel auditor. And on my next slide, I'll touch on that a little bit more. If for whatever reason we cannot approve, the project administrator will leave a detailed note and send the report back for revisions. So here's kind of our approval routing decision process decision tree. So if we've designated that it's federal funds, our first question is going to be, okay, does this follow the system member policy, yes or no? If the answer is yes, then our next question is this a domestic trip or a foreign trip? And what we define as foreign in this instance is anything outside of the US. Some sponsors have a different definition of what specifically is foreign travel. Some, like Canada or Mexico, they don't consider foreign. But for the purposes of this review, anything outside the US is considered foreign. If it doesn't follow the system member travel policy, then it routes to the SRS travel auditor. If it is a foreign trip on federal funds, then we are routing that to the SRS travel auditor to conduct a Fly America Act review. And Kathy will touch on specifics of the Fly America Act during her portion of the presentation. After she's conducted her review of Fly America Act review, then it goes on to the system member travel auditor. For local funds, we're making that same question of, is this a system member travel policy or not? And so if yes, then it goes on to the system member travel auditor for review. If no, then we will route it to the SRS travel auditor. And for all state funds, these all route to the SRS travel auditor. And here's an example of some sponsors that generally have their own travel policy or state travel policy. So just kind of a quick reference here, should you have any awards with these sponsors. Okay, and now I'm going to turn it over to Kathy and she will go over her portion.
Hi, thanks, Natalie, appreciate it. Okay, on this slide, it shows the number of travel reports that the SRS auditors saw for the past 3 years. The SRS auditor does not see every report, as Natalie mentioned. Some reports, the domestic, federal, and federally funded without airfare, skip the SRS auditor. And these are all audited by the system member. As you can see, travel took quite a hit with the COVID, and we still aren't back to our old numbers yet. Many conferences are still virtual, and international travel requires special permissions. However, we should see an upward trend in 2022. General travel guidelines are travel agents, reminders, and non-A&M affiliated travel. Corporate travel planners is the contracted and preferred travel agent. Any outside agent Any outside agent used must provide equal or lesser pricing. The conservation of funds policy also pertains to travel agent fees. If you are booking online in Concur or you want to maximize efficiency by having a travel agent assisted booking automatically uploaded into Concur, then you need to use corporate travel planners. By not booking through Concur or CTP, you will not be able to save money on our discounted contract rates with multiple vendors. The traveler will also be 100% responsible for the airfare is in compliance with the Fly America Act, and any exceptions are documented. Documentation must be attached to the Concur expense report. Reminders. The IRS accountability plan requires that travel reports meet 3 rules. Your expense must have a business connection. You must adequately account for these within a reasonable amount of time, and you must return any excess also within a reasonable amount of time. If you meet these 3 rules for the accountability plan, your employer shouldn't include any reimbursements on your income. After 90 days, the reimbursement will be added to your income on your W-2 form. The university travel card should only be used for travel related to expenses, related to business expenses, and the business use of the card is highly encouraged. This prevents the employee from paying out of pocket and waiting for any reimbursements. Comments are very important. You might think something is self-explanatory, but the auditor may not. For example, any rented car larger than a sedan requires justification. If you don't supply one, you will find the report back in your queue, increasing the length of time it takes for your report to get through the system and delaying any reimbursement. For non-employees, such as guests, consultants, and other individuals not employed by TAMU, they must also adhere to the grant travel requirements and must travel by the least expensive method, car or rental or economy airfare, as well as follow GSA rates. If a prospective employee pays out of pocket, taxes will be reimbursed. If someone at TAMU pays for them on the travel card, then the exemption certificates will need to be presented. The Fly America Act, Open Skies, and the Fly America Exemption Form. The Fly America Act requires that all federally funded travel be on a U.S. flag carrier. In no case is the use of a foreign air carrier justified based on cost, convenience, or traveler preference. And although Canada can be considered domestic under some grants, that is a financial designation. The Fly America Act will still apply, and Air Canada is not a U.S. flag airline. The Open Skies Agreement is a bilateral or multilateral air transport agreement between the U.S. and the government of a foreign country, and is the largest exception to the Fly America Act. The agreement allows for travel to the European Union, or allows for travel on European Union, Swiss, Australian, and Japanese airlines with some limitations. Do not assume that traveling will be allowed. You need to contact your CTP travel agent, SRS travel auditor, or a project administrator for verification before purchasing non-US flag airline tickets. Also, the United Kingdom is no longer part of the European Union and no longer has an agreement with the United States. The Fly America Exception Form. When a traveler uses a non-US flag carrier on travel to be charged to a federally sponsored award, this form, along with any relevant supporting documentation, must be completed and submitted for reimbursement in the attached receipts of the expense report. There are 3 levels of exceptions that they allow which is exceptions for travel between to and from the U.S., between 2 points outside the U.S., or there was just no U.S. flag carrier available for the itinerary at the time of booking. So there's a lot of reasons for exceptions. And one of the exceptions, of course, is the Open Skies Agreement. The state of Texas travel policy. We'll go over public transportation, mileage reimbursements and rental cars, and meals and lodging. If booking outside of Concur, travelers should comparison shop for the airfare itinerary that most efficiently, time and cost, serves their travel needs. However, Concur offers the same inventory, global distribution system as all other airlines, rental cars, hotels, and other travel agencies or travel systems offer. Economy class tickets, air, rail, boat, bus, should always be chosen unless you have a medical necessity, which is on file with Human Resources. You need to add a comment to the line item to say you have a medical necessity on file with Human Resources, and you don't have to explain what it is. Seat upgrades are not allowable on most grants that follow the Texas guidelines. Your first bag can be claimed as a business expense. Any additional bags will need to have comments in the line item for the claim. Also, tips for Uber, Lyft, and taxi drivers are not allowed on any state-funded travel request. For rental cars, the state uses the rental car calculator. It is required for any state agency that one must calculate the most cost-effective method of transportation and use that transportation, or the reimbursement will be limited to the most cost-effective method. Cars other than a sedan require justification in the comments. And the Texas motor vehicle rental tax is an unallowable tax. You must show an exemption certificate to the rental agency to have the tax removed. It is preferred that the traveler refill the gas tank before returning the vehicle for cost savings. Mileage reimbursement. The preferred method for mileage calculation is the Concur mileage calculator. However, actual odometer readings are also allowable. The mileage calculation will show the shortest path. If you log more miles than shown on the map, perhaps there was construction detour or you knew traffic was going to be terrible, then you have to justify in the comments of the line item why you increased the mileage of the map. Currently, personal mileage is 56 cents per mile. If a rental car was less expensive, but you used your personal vehicle, the mileage must be adjusted on the map to the estimated car rental rate. If you use the mapping for mileage calculation, you will need to adjust the trip length to decrease the actual mileage. The 4 per car rule states that if multiple people are going to the same event, mileage can only be claimed for 1 car for every 4 people. You need to make note of the names of any people carpooling with you in the comments of the line item. This also applies to rental cars. If a 4 per person rule was not followed, a justification must also be included in the comments, such as, well, there were 9 people, so you had 1 left over who got to drive their own car, or you had 1 person that carried all the supplies, so their car was packed full. Gas is not reimbursable if claiming personal mileage. If gas is purchased for some other reason, like a boat, note that in the comments of the line item so the auditor understands it was not for the personal vehicle. For meals and lodgings, we use the GSA rates on their website. These rates outline the maximum reimbursable cost for meals and lodging per day. They change based on your travel designation. Be sure to review these rates prior to your trip as they fluctuate occasionally. And the first and last day of all meals are 75% of the meal rate. And in GSA, we'll show that in the bottom that there's what 75%, how much 75% is. Unused meals can be used to get a higher rate on your room. For example, College Station's rate is $96. 75% for the first and last day, that's $44.25, and $59 for everything in the middle. If you can't find you'll probably can't find a room if it's the day before a big game for $96. However, if you choose to keep meals at a minimum, you can get a room for up to the amount left over on your meal per diem plan, plus your lodging amount. So if you only eat $14.25 in meals, you'll have $30 left over for your hotel allowance, which is $126 on the first day. The opposite scenario does not work. So you cannot decrease your hotel rate in order to get more food or meal allowance. Valet parking is only allowed if you aren't given a choice, such as a downtown hotel only has valet parking, and they, you know, if that's the way it is, and then fine, you will get reimbursed. But you need to leave a comment in the report that states there was no other choice. For business meals, the employee portion of the business meal goes towards the individual's GSA allowance. Sales tax is not allowed on business meals, although it is allowed on individual meals. You'll need to present the Texas state exemption form to be able to get the sales tax removed. You also need to add the topic discussed, and all names of the people at the meal must be listed and should be either uploaded in the receipts or noted in the comments on a line item. Unallowable costs. The state hotel occupancy tax form. You need to present this form for the hotel to get the exemption. The sales tax exempt form can also be prevented to avoid sales tax on things like parking, meals, and internet. Meals and hotels may not be claimed within the range of the employee's headquarters. Your headquarters is listed on the same page Natalie showed you earlier. It's listed in there. So for me, it would be College Station. However, as an individual, if an individual is using an alternative work location, it would still say College Station. So you're going to have to make sure that you comment that the person is using an individual or an alternative work location and enter that in the comments of the line item. Meals cannot be claimed if there's no overnight stay. If an overnight stay is not being claimed because it was paid for, provided by somebody else, the information must be provided in the comments. Meal tips or hotel service tips are not allowed on any grants that use the state of Texas travel guidelines. Sponsored specific guidelines. CPRIT, otherwise known as the Cancer Prevention and Research Institute of Texas. Although CPRIT follows the state of Texas travel guidelines, they require all supporting documentation to be uploaded into receipts. They request that you give them full detailed receipts showing everything that was eaten. Credit card receipts are not acceptable. Personal mileage documentation must include either odometer readings or maps from Concur showing the route taken, and must also be uploaded into the receipts. The GSA page must be screen printed to PDF and also attached to the receipts. If a receipt is not in US dollars, then a conversion to US dollars must be provided, either written on the receipt or, and then uploaded, or you can print it to PDF if you have it online. Membership dues are not allowable. Make sure they are not embedded in the cost of the conference, and all acronyms need to be fully defined. QNRF, or Qatar National Research Fund. QNRF prefers the use of Qatar Airlines, so they do not follow the Fly America Act. But they also allow other airlines if QNR or Qatar does not fly to where you need to go. Visa fees, shipment of passports by mail, inoculations, these are all allowable expenses. Costs incurred by employees and officers, including consultants of the awarded institution for travel, include costs of accommodations. Other sustenance and incidental expenses shall be considered reasonable and allowable only to the extent such costs do not exceed charges normally allowed by the institution in its regular operations as a result of the institution's travel policy and in compliance with the per diem rates set by QNRF, which are subject to change annually. Qatar has a list of items they will not cover on their website, which is found on the last page. The link for that will be found on the last page of this presentation. Additional state sponsors. Some state sponsors want to see additional documentation outside the state of Texas travel guidelines. This list is not inclusive. If you are unsure, consult with your project administrator prior to travel. Detailed receipts are required for the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, Texas Parks and Wildlife Department, Texas General Land Office, Texas Water Development Board, and the Government University Research Initiative. Texas Department of Agriculture requires detailed receipts, and they do not allow meals on their grant. If you do not have a full receipt, there is a form you can fill out called Document in Lieu of Receipt, and you have to sign it, list everything that you ate, and upload that to the receipts of the travel report. And here are the helpful links in case you need any forms or want to see the travel policies of CPRIT or QNRF. And that is the end of the presentation. If anybody has any questions.
All right, if anybody has any questions, feel free to, you can either unmute and ask them, or you can ask them through the chat, and we'll share those with the presenters. I've got one question for y'all that's come in. If I have a personal expense charged to my travel card during the trip, how do I handle this?
Yeah, it's a really good question. You have two options, really. First is to just mark it as a personal expense, and then it won't go into your account allocations. It'll just be marked as a personal expense, which you would later be asked to be reimbursed. The second thing is to allocate it to a non-sponsored account, and you would have to check the allowability against whatever other account you're allocating it to. But in terms of our review, it just needs to be a non-sponsored account.
You know, y'all went through so many different travel requirements if you're federal or state, or some of these sponsors have specific requirements. So here's a question that came in. How do I know which travel policy applies to my project before I travel?
So first, we always recommend, starting that conversation with your project administrator. They will definitely be able to help you identify the specific travel policy that applies to your project. Another option is to go into Maestro, and under terms and conditions, when you're in your project view, there is a section specifically designated for travel. And in that section, there is a field for travel policy. So that's a way to look it up yourself if you would like to do that. But always, we encourage you to reach out to your project administrator should you have a question on that.
Got one more that's come in. Am I required to use a rental car if traveling on state funds?
Okay, yeah, I'm gonna let Kathy actually answer that one.
Yeah, there's no problem. If you don't want to use a rental car, you can choose to use your personal car. However, the amount that you can claim, you can't claim the full 56 cents per mile. You can only claim the minimum amount that the rental car was, if the calculator said that rental car was less expensive. The calculator tells you that your personal vehicle is less expensive. Well, then just, you use your personal car, but it's depending on what the calculator tells you as to how much you can claim for it. You can always use your personal car if that is your choice.
Did have a question here in the chat. I'll just read it off to you. Can you clarify on the meals if the 75% meal per diem applies on the first and last day of travel on federal funds, or if employees can exceed 75% of the meal per diem on the first and last day of travel, if the transactions are on the agency liability card, or if they can provide all meal receipts?
You are limited to the 75% first and last day. It's how GSA works, and it's the rules that we follow. So there are really no exceptions to the 75%.
And I think they're specifically asking about federal funds. And so that would be in respective to each system member's travel policy, which I think most of them do use the GSA methodology. But I would definitely check with your system member travel auditor contact for federal fund.